Welcome back. Welcome back. Sorry about that. Hopefully, you guys have had a great week. And we're going to go ahead and jump right into chapter two. So, in chapter two, we're going to talk about a few different things. And one of those things is knowing your audience analysis. We're also going to talk about demographics, meaning we want to make sure that we're creating speeches that will be interesting to others. We'll use demographics and psychographics to kind of create that idea set, try to find something that our audience may like. We're going to talk about contextual factors of audience analysis, as well as listening when there's public speakers. Listening in general. Listening is very important. So let's jump right in. When we think about public speaking, it involves content and relationship, right? We have to create a speech, and then it has to be relatable to our audience. That relationship depends on knowing our audience. We have to analyze our audience, and we do those through two types of methods, two, I guess, characteristics. The first characteristic is demographic, the second is psychographic. Demographic characteristics. When we think about demographics, we tend to think about them in positive and or negative senses, meaning what audiences may like, what audiences won't like. For instance, I would probably not, and I don't take this any way, but if I were a public speaker and I had been picked by, let's say, the Republican Party to do something for Trump, I would probably steer clear of certain topics, like, for instance, I don't know, maybe like picking a topic that would be deemed offensive to them or something that would be a flashpoint for them. Transgender might be one of those topics that they might not want to hear about, meaning we think about our audience. We want to pick a topic that appeals to our audience. Now, not all demographics are important for every speech situation, meaning many speeches can be good for a lot of different people. And we don't ever want to stereotype or totalize our audience, right? Notice how I said might not. We can't typically say that all Trump supporters would be anti any one thing, because when we do that, we're saying that we're basically stereotyping, we're totalizing, actually, technically. We're saying that all of these people believe a certain belief set and can't see any other belief set. When we think about stereotyping, it has such a negative connotation, right? We think about maybe racial or gender biases, right? But what I'm trying to say here is I'm not necessarily going after the negative idea set. What I'm trying to say is make sure, in the end, our audience is getting something out of our speech. Otherwise, we're wasting our time. So when we think about the characteristics of demographics, what group people together? Well, age, gender, race, ethnicity, culture, education, religion, socioeconomic bias or levels. Sexual orientation can play a factor here. Family status, a common bond. For instance, students, you guys have a common experience. And when we think about a regional, for instance, you catch my accent. I'm not from necessarily North Georgia, right? I'm from the Midwest, and I have that accent. Now, I've been in North Georgia for long enough that I start to have some of those regional characteristics, meaning I know where things are. I go to certain places. I experience certain things. I enjoy them. I enjoy hiking. I enjoy the outdoors. I enjoy microbrews. We think about occupations. My wife has to give speeches regarding medical practice in her work. So lots of different ways, thoughts, ideas there. When we think about psychographics, it's a whole different angle. Psychographics take out the context of demographics and takes it out of the equation, basically. Psychographics are beliefs, attitudes, values, and needs. So let's talk about these. Beliefs. Beliefs are things we hold to be true. We believe a certain way. Christians believe that Jesus is the Son of God, right? That's a belief set. So I have friends that believe Ford is superior to General Motors in every way. I don't know that they're wrong. I don't know that they're right, but that's their beliefs. Those beliefs are hard to change, but not impossible to change, meaning the individual has to want to change them, right? This is not something we're going to just change on our own. This is something we're going to have to want to change. Our beliefs come from our experience and authority, meaning what we've experienced in life and people that we would think to be in authority or people that we hold highly regarded believe the same way. So therefore, we take it to a truth, whether or not it's true, right? When we think about traits, we think about stability, centrality, saliency, and strength. And I would dive deeper into that if this were a class on advanced public speaking or advanced communication, but we're not going to dive that deep. Attitude. Attitude is a stable, positive, or negative response to a person, an idea, object, or policy. For some of you, when I mentioned Trump earlier in this speech or in this class, it probably elicited some response, maybe positive, maybe negative. Right? When I mentioned Christianity, it probably elicited a response or an attitude, maybe a positive, maybe a negative. Right? Now, remember, our attitude here is not like our mood or emotion. Our attitude is about what's an idea, an object, or a person would evoke within us, meaning it affects us, but it's not our true deep attitude, right? It's just our attitude towards something. So, what is your attitude on people smoking in public places? I want you to think about that idea. Is it a positive? Do you think it's okay for people to smoke in public places? Or do you think it's a negative? People should smoke in public places. When we talk about values, values are goals we strive for and what we consider most important or most desirable in our life. They're not the same as wants. Right? Our values are actually the things that we hold near and dear, not our desires. They may be desirable, but they're not the same as a true desire. Meaning there's stuff we construct within us, things that we believe and dear to our heart. They're not physical objects in this case, right? We're not talking about desires in a desire sense. Oh, I desire to have a 1969 Camaro convertible. That's not a value, right? That's just a physical desire. A value would be I work hard, I provide for my family. I believe family is important. I enjoy free time, and I believe a little bit of personal free time is important. Those are values, those are beliefs within me that I hold near and dear. Another value I is education. I believe that education should be affordable. And I believe that we should pursue education, not even just for getting a better job, but to make us a better person. So I want you to think about your core values. And that's honestly, I think, the question for this unit, if I'm remembering. Let's jump over into needs. Needs are important deficiencies we are motivated to fill. That's what the text says, and that's I believe that. When we need things, when we think about things, there's a hierarchy of needs. It's called Maslow's hierarchy. and it describes how we operate as human beings, both in communication, organization, education, everything. A lower level must be met, satisfied, before we level up, so to speak. Physiological needs have to be met. I can't be hungry and then chasing love. I have to be safe and secure. I have to have a roof over my head. I have to have all those things before love and belonging really becomes a need that I'm looking to actualize on it. I need a need that I would put more emphasis on. So basic needs to love, that helps create self-esteem, positive self-esteem, we hope, right? And then self-actualization, we can make changes within our life. So again, Maslow's hierarchy, not a huge part of this, but it is important in communication. For instance, try talking to a lunchtime crowd when their lunch is late about something super serious. The audience isn't going to be engaged. They're going to tune you out. I know, unfortunately, from experience. When we think about things that are important to consider talking to others in a public speaking environment, we think about that. Another thing, we need to be conscious of time. How much time is this audience allowing us to give this speech? How much time is the venue allowing us to give this speech, right? What's the time of day this speech is given? I gave you the example earlier. I was giving a speech regarding financial security to a crowd that was supposed to have lunch provided, and lunch was late. That was unfortunate. That kept them from getting the truest meaning of my speech, probably. It was a safe assumption. You have to think about why an audience is gathered together. Why are they there? What are they seeking to get from this speech, right? What are their expectations? We have to think about how large the audience is and how big the physical space is so that we can speak loudly enough to convey our message. Now, let's talk a little bit about listening. Listening is something I think many of us, unfortunately, from our parents, may have had a negative connotation too, right? You need to listen. You need to pay attention. You need to, okay? Listening is a practical art. It actually helps us in life. This semester, I'm not having you do this as a requirement for this class, but I'd really like for you, if you would, to look at this website and do a quiz for me. That would be beneficial to me. And if you would, email me your results. I would appreciate it greatly. Okay, because I'm working on my doctorate thesis, and my doctorate thesis is about listening. I need to be a better listener. And I'm going to show you in a few minutes maybe about that, as long as time permits. But listening and hearing is the physical, actual process of sound waves hit a eardrum and we get something out of it. It could be, I don't know, a good bass note on a song. It could be a great dance tune. It could be somebody trying to convey something to us in a conversation. It could be this lecture, right? It could be many things. So when we think about hearing, it's the physical act versus listening is the active process. That's engaging our brain. An active process where one is specifically making an effort to understand, to process, and retain this information. And if we think about life, why is listening important, right? That's what our parents and teachers were trying to drill into our head because it is important. We need to pay attention. We need to hear. We need to listen. I have this chart over here to the right. Now, I shared it for a reason, the pie graphs. When we think about most people in life, we spend 70% of our time communicating, 30% of our time not communicating. That's an average across all people. But when we think about a college student, your communication in a daily basis is much different. you spend only about 30 to 35% of your time speaking, speaking knowledge. You're listening more because you're a college student. You're in these lectures, you're listening, right? You're writing down things. You're trying to get things written down, or you're doing tests. There's your writing section, right? And then reading. You're reading information. So our body wants to communicate, right? We want to spend more time communicating. That's why the average is so high at 70%. Yet as a college student, you're repressed. You were not allowed to communicate in the way that you normally would. So that's why I feel for you. But listening is important because listening is the art of retaining information so that you get better grades, so that you learn more things and have more skills in life, right? So let's talk about the types of listening, why they're important. So when we think about listening, you have comprehensive, understanding and remembering important information. Comprehensive listening is very important for college students, right? You have to remember the information. Then there's empathetic listening. This is what we do many times around our family and our friends. We listen. We're trying to understand feelings and motivations of others. We're trying to help. We're trying to be in a relationship, perhaps, right? Relationship based listening. Then there's appreciative listening. Appreciative listening is listening to music, understanding and getting something from them. Right? And then critical. Critical is evaluating evidence or arguments and figuring out if they're honest or not. Critical is one of those things that's very important to us. We weed out information on a daily basis, right? Think about your audience of listening. If we're trying to get a point across to our audience, we want to be redundant. We want to repeat certain central ideas. We want to make sure that that redundancy helps the audience retain the information that we're trying to give them and move them in a direction hopefully we're trying to move them in by providing them information. When we think about clear communication, we also need to have a central idea statement, and we'll talk more about that coming up. We also want to make sure that the audience has an idea of what our main points are going to be. We're going to use connective statements, phrases, and or words that will connect ideas and move us from one point to the next. Not or or oh yeah, my next idea is no. Connective statements help move us from one idea to the next. For instance, a connective statement would be another point I'm trying to make is conclusions are very important to having your audience listen. Notice that I used a connective statement there to bring us to the next idea. We've got to have a conclusion, and summaries in our conclusions help do two things. A, helps the audience retain what we told them, and B, it helps the audience be clear about what we told them. When we think about repetition or redundancy, it's repeated structural aspects of a speech. For instance, repeated ideas, maybe even repeated words directly. Now, we do those things and listen to help our listeners be successful. But what barriers do we all have? We all have many, many barriers to listening. We have our environment, for instance, noisiness, distractions. Hopefully, you guys didn't hear too much. My heat kicked in. This is why I don't generally do these classes when it's too hot or too cold outside as far as the recordings for them, because my office is near the furnace. I have a basement office. I have a man cave down in the basement. Half of it's divided into an office, and the other half retro gaming machines, which I never seem to have a chance to play. Right, big TV. Sometimes we hang out down here because I have a wood burning stove, and it's nice and warm. So today I didn't build a fire. I didn't realize it was going to be as cool as it was. So, I have this noise now potentially in the background, and hopefully you didn't notice it. when we think about noise, noise is one of the neuroplasties, affects the neuroplasties. Neuroplasties change our ability or willingness to listen or to comprehend a long speech. We have, even my generation, an hour's a long time. And with every decade, an hour's a long time for my decade. My decade's looking for 45 minutes at most. Okay. For any one thing. And it's no secret if you look back at my age and when I went back to school before, I'll tell you, I'm right at the 50 mark, right? Right at 50 years old. So my age group's only going to hang in there for about 40 minutes. You're going to lose them, no matter how good your speech is. 40-year-olds, usually, honestly, 30 to 35 minutes is about the best they've got. That's all they're going to hang in for. What we're finding is every decade, a decrease of about 10 minutes is occurring. So you can see how this is, our use of technology is affecting our ability to retain information, to learn from a lecture. Lectures aren't the best method of teaching anymore. Now they're necessary, but they're not always the best. That's why, if you notice, I don't ever have lectures very often that are longer than, unless I'm covering 2 units, my lecture is not going to be an hour and a half. Okay. I never ran when I taught in the classroom, I don't teach for the full segment because I watch my audience and I start to see when they start to fade, we either do an activity or we cut it for that day. Okay. Because of neuroplasty. It's our ability for the brain to form and organize, reorganize synaptic connections. It helps us learn or experience things. It helps us retain information. As I mentioned earlier, noise is a problem. I'm bad about this. I tend to speak quickly. I grew up in the Midwest. People function, our rate of speech is higher than the national average, meaning we get more words in. I don't know if any of you guys ever saw the Micro Machines commercials or ever heard an auctioneer where they speak very quickly. You think about that, that is moving at a much faster rate than our normal speech process, right? Well, Midwesterners tend to move at a more, about a pacing of we get about 10 words per minute to 15 words per minute. I tend to get closer to 20 words per minute, sometimes and that's a bad thing. So I have to purposefully slow myself down. Sometimes another barrier to our listening could be the things around us, our laptop, our phone, hearing noises. We talked about that, but also smells. Think about it. I was teaching one of my classes, and it was near one of the medical classes and classrooms, and there was a horrible odor that came out of that room. I have no idea what they were doing, but it was very gross, and it caused us to cut out of our class a little early. There was no way to get around that barrier to listening because it was stinky. It was sulfury, smelling, chemical-y mess, right? Another time, I had a course around lunchtime, and it was near the culinary arts section. They were baking. You can imagine how that interfered with my students' ability to get something from that lesson. Sometimes we create our own barriers to listening. For instance, we go in without listening for purpose or preparation, meaning we're here because we have to be. That attitude will not allow us to get something real and good from our that lecture, that speaking engagement, right? We need to go in with a purpose. I always strive to get at least one piece of new information from anything I do, whether it's watching a documentary on TV or if it's going to a lecture. Now, most of the time in a lecture, I'm looking to get more than one piece, but I always strive to get some new piece of information from anything I do. Sometimes we're not prepared to listen. Part of listening is writing down. Sometimes it's retaining information. So listening is about repeating it within our brain. Also, we come into speeches sometimes with prejudices or preconceptions. Remember, it goes back to the idea of knowing our audience or a person could create a negative experience for us. That's unfortunate, and that does happen. We have to adjust our idea set to be open to receive more information. Ways we can improve our listening, because you'll find that most of us aren't great listeners. We think we are, but we're not. So, ways we can improve our listening is to believe that listening matters to others, because it does. To come to an event or a lecture prepared, meaning with something to write something down on, taking those notes diligently, right? But taking notes isn't every word. Taking notes is important ideas. When we come prepared, also, let's be prepared, meaning let's not be distracted by electronic devices or other things. Let's be ready to listen. Now, when we take notes, paper is better than a laptop. It's been scientifically proven 3 to 1 that people will retain the information if they write it out versus type it out on the laptop. Another trick I like to use is write questions just in case they open it for questions later, or something I can explore on my own to get an answer in my brain on something that I have to listen to a lecture on. And I always try to break down listening in a short term and a long term, meaning they're going to have benefits. What are going to be my short term benefits from this lecture or listening to this experience? What are my long term benefits going to be? A long term benefits from this lecture could be that you improve your listening skills, you end up retaining more information, you end up moving further in life, and your partner in life, whoever that might be, is going to be extremely happy with the fact that you actually listen to them, hear them, and understand them. Again, I really would like you, if you would, to take this skills test and send me a copy of the results. I can't make you do it, but I'd like you for you to do it. I think in the past I've encouraged it, um, and it's worked out well. It does help me. I'm working on a doctorate thesis. Apologize. This is what I mean by, as we try to listen, the phones go off. My clients try to get a hold of me because they know on Sundays I'm available sometimes. And they leave me a message because I know in the afternoon I'll call them back. That's what's happening today. Anyway, back to where I was. If you would please do the skills you need, and then send me the results, it would be beneficial to me. I thank you. I'm going to share with you my results from this. I have 3 degrees in communication, and yet I am not perfect. I am far from perfect, quite honestly. My overall score was only a 78, and I answered very honestly. And if you notice, my lowest score is listening. Our interpersonal skills are important and essential, honestly, in life. We need these to move through life together. Okay. We need them through school, work, social events. If we improve these skills, we will become better. My score is completely average when it comes to listening. I rated myself above average, but the reality was when I answered the questions, I'm average. And it's an area that I am consciously working on. Listening is, I tend to like to try to anticipate what somebody's going to ask me when they ask me a question. I try to anticipate starting to answer the question before the question's even been asked. And those are things that I need to improve. My emotional intelligence, I said I was above average, and I am indeed above average. Emotional intelligence is probably my strongest forte. I can imagine what it's like to be someone. I can see and read people's micro expressions and therefore adjust my speaking to meet their expectations better. It's just a trait I have. My previous partners, we'll call it that, and my current partner would agree to that, right? It's something that I'm good at. I listen, and by listening, I prove that I listen by action. Verbal communication, I said I was above average, and I'm slightly above average. Okay. There, I'm just slightly above average. I can communicate well with almost anyone. It's a strength of mine. I've always had it, but I'm working to improve it further. I'm communicating in groups. This is where one other place where I excel in, but you may not. The goal is to take these kind of quizzes, find out where you lack, and try to improve those areas. Because life is a long road, it's a marathon, and we want to be the best we can be from the start to the finish. We can get better, and that's the goal of this, to get better. That's it for chapter 2. I hope you enjoyed and have a great day.